Well, it's Monday morning here in Washington, and it's back to work for the American president after the Thanksgiving holiday. The White House hopes to focus on getting a tax bill passed, but there are other challenges. The Trump administration faces a legal fight over who will lead the nation's top consumer watchdog agency. President Trump is being sued to block Budget Director Mick Mulvaney being appointed. He, of course, is a vocal critic of the agency, and the president wants him to take over. But the agency's deputy director was all set to take the job and has filed a legal challenge. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, sexual harassment claims are also taking center stage. And of course, the US president is taking to Twitter to lash out at the media again, including this network. His tweet a little over an hour ago suggested a contest to see which of the networks, plus CNN, and not including Fox, is the most dishonest, corrupt, and or distorted in its political coverage of what he calls your favorite president. He says they are all bad, and the winner would receive the fake news trophy. Well, Brian Stelter, CNN's Money's senior media correspondent, is following all of this. And Brian, the president continues his assault on the free press. And we've heard many come out defending his attack on CNN International, including a media critic that you spoke to. Give us a sense of what was said.
Yes, indeed. David Zurwick of the Baltimore Sun. Many other TV critics also weighed in and saying this kind of rhetoric from a U.S. president really flies in the face of decades of precedent, and it does create a dangerous climate for journalists operating all around the world. You know, the president of the U.S. tweeted over the weekend specifically about CNN International. One of his comments was that this channel does not reflect the U.S. to the world in the proper way. He said the outside world does not see the truth from this channel. Well, CNN responded within a matter of minutes with a pretty pointed statement saying, quote, "It's not CNN's job to represent the U.S. to the world. That's your job. Our job is to report the news." That, by the way, has been shared more than 3 times as much as President Trump's original comment. But, you know, whether it's about CNN or whether it's about Time Magazine or any other network, anybody else he's complaining about, the through line for President Trump is that he's trying to tell his supporters not to believe what they hear unless it's from one of the outlets he approves of, like Fox News. When the job gets tough, the news gets fake. That's the message he continues to relay over and over again. I think it definitely has an impact among some of his most loyal supporters, but many other Americans and folks around the world see it for what it is, which is an attempt to just kind of attack the messenger as opposed to make progress here in the U.S.
And Brian, I took to Twitter, as did many CNN anchors and correspondents, pointing out his criticism that comes at a time when many correspondents are putting their lives on the line to uncover the truth. What does this sort of a message from a U.S. president send to rogue regimes?
Normally, American presidents stand up for press freedom. They try to be a symbol for the world. They try to be a model for other countries, especially for undemocratic countries that may be seeing a blossoming of the press. What we've seen in recent years instead is the opposite. We have seen some countries cracking down on a relatively free press, trying to shut down independent news outlets. And when you have an American president being so critical of the press in the U.S., it does damage in other countries as well. It sends a bad message to other leaders of other countries. So I think that's one of the concerns that we've heard in the last couple of days as the president's renewed his complaints against the media. You know, this is one of those flashpoints we see every so often. I really think it is correlated in some ways to when the president's frustrated by his lack of accomplishments, frustrated by legislative delays, frustrated by the Russia investigations. He lashes out at the news coverage of those issues. But obviously, I don't see journalists backing down. If anything, we see really impressive reporting on a daily basis from the CNNs and the New York Times and the Washington Posts of the world, all trying to dig into what is being accomplished in Washington and so far what is not.
Absolutely. And of course, Brian, this comes on the same weekend that the president sent a tweet out saying that he was effectively turning down the chance to be Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Time Magazine called that completely incorrect. The president seems overly concerned about how he is perceived in the media.
And that goes back to his days as a businessman on the rise in New York in the 1980s, trying to build billions here in Manhattan. He cared a lot about being on the cover of the New York Post. He cared a lot about the gossip items in the tabloids. And we see that through to this day. He cares deeply about something like Time Magazine, which honestly was a lot more relevant 10 or 20 years ago. But because of that status as a print publication, often seen on the desk in the Oval Office, President Trump says he doesn't want to be Man of the Year, Person of the Year, but we'll see what the editors ultimately decide to do. You know, the magazine apparently asked him for an interview. That would make a lot of sense, even though the magazine won't confirm this. But President Trump primarily only speaks to interviewers from Fox News and from other outlets perceived as really, really friendly to him. He's not taking questions from outlets that are mainstream networks or newspapers or magazines. He's really insulated himself with outlets that are supportive of him. It's a disappointing development for anybody here in the U.S. or other countries that wants to see thorough questioning of the American president.
Brian Stelter, always great to get your perspective for us. Thanks for joining us from New York.
Thank you.
We are watching Connect the World. Still to come, critical food and medical aid has arrived in Yemen after Saudi Arabia relaxes a blockade. Millions of people are desperate for help. We'll have their stories next.